Um, Good afternoon, everybody. That is good afternoon for everybody who is joining us from Europe or thereabouts. Good morning to Ron. Welcome to all. Welcome to the Hague program on international cybersecurity's monthly seminar series. It's a program in which we invite usually an author of a book to come talk with us, sort of give us the rundown of what is in the book, and then have a discussion with those who gathered here. My name is Dennis Broeders. I'm professor of global security and technology at Leiden University here in the Netherlands in The Hague. And today we're going to be talking with Ron Deibert. Welcome, Ron. About his latest book, Chasing Shadows, Cyber Espionage, Subversion, and the Global Fight for Democracy. For those of you who don't know Ron, Ron is a professor of political science at the University of Toronto, and I guess in his opinion, and as in mine, perhaps more importantly, he is the founder and the director of the Citizen Lab, a world-renowned digital security research center, also located at the University of Toronto. Now, the lab is something that does what he calls a mixed methods research on global security, digital technologies, and human rights. And in the book, you talk about the Citizen Lab obviously a lot, and you call the mission Counterintelligence for Global Civil Society. And if you read the book, then that is very much the story of the Citizen Lab and what you have done over the past, well, at least decade and a half. I'll let you do the actual numbers, but that's resoundingly. So the book very much describes the history of the Citizen Lab. It's an organization that has over the years uncovered dozens of cyber espionage cases, um, tries to protect people in countries around the world. It's very much a book about the work of the Citizen Lab, about the people who are doing the work, so Ron himself, but also many members of the lab who change over the years, of course. And it's also very explicit about the victims, but also the perpetrators of who is behind these attacks, these espionage work. It comes highly recommended by Margaret Atwood, which, given the nature of Margaret Atwood's work, is not necessarily a comforting thought, I would say. And it's not, right? This is not a book you pick up if you want to sleep well at night. But the topic is extremely important, I think. It's important for what's happening now, but I think it's also important in terms of what it foreshadows for the future, right? So what is happening now in sort of very much niche, high-end espionage will also trickle down further in the future, and that's going to have implications for many of us. In the blurb, the book is also likened to a John Le Carré novel updated for the digital age. So I thought I would find a good Le Carré quote for the Citizen Lab, and I think I found one. It's from A Most Wanted Man by John Le Carré. And the quote is, "The fact that you can only do a little is no excuse for doing nothing." And I think that is actually not a bad banner for the Citizen Lab. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Ron. We agreed that Ron would talk for, I don't know, about 20 minutes. Then Ron and I will have a little to and fro, and then we'll open it up for questions for everyone. As always, we start on the hour, and we also stop on the hour. Ron, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dennis, and thank you everyone for being here today. I'm really glad to have this discussion with you. And like Dennis said, I'm just going to have some general comments off the top about the book. This is a different book than probably other books in the series, and I should make that clear right from the beginning. Dennis, it sounds like you've read it, so you'll know that this is not a typical academic book. It's not a book that has an argument with a bunch of hypotheses, and I'm going to examine them, a bunch of recommendations at the end. It is an adventure story, really. It is, as the book jacket says, a real life spy thriller. And in many ways, it's a David versus Goliath story, or maybe better yet, David versus many Goliaths. I really like the quote from A Most Wanted Man about doing little. That's kind of what it has felt like over the last 20 years or so. Citizen Lab is a small organization, and yet we've been able to take on some of the world's worst autocrats and dictators and some of the private companies that service them. Um, and it's been quite an exciting adventure. It's also a bit of a memoir in a way too. So I spent a bit of time going back talking about um, answering a question that I'm asked a lot, which is, how did you come up with the idea for the Citizen Lab? So I thought, well, I'll use this opportunity of the book to go back in deep history, all the way back to the 90s, actually, and talk about some of the inspirations that led me to create the Citizen Lab back in 2001. So for those of you who don't know, the mission of the Citizen Lab is, as Dennis said, to do counterintelligence for global civil society. And actually, when I made the proposal for the Citizen Lab back in 2001, that's exactly how I described it. I used that very language. And back then, I was thinking that governments do counterintelligence. They're always looking out what their adversaries are doing and trying to understand the threat environment around them. The private sector even does counterintelligence, mostly using private sector actors to help them. But who's looking out for journalists, human rights defenders, activists, and others, especially as we are increasingly immersed in this digital ecosystem? So my idea was to create a university-based group that would use very careful evidence-based methods to pull back the curtains on what's going on, especially in the covert realm, what governments are doing to control information, to manipulate people, to spy on them. And I was of the view that there were methods available from computer science, engineering science, the technical disciplines, especially at the beginning, that would enable us to document some of these threats to civil society and bring them to light. So the idea was to um, use the platform of the university to do very rigorous peer-reviewed research that would be difficult for the bad actors who are the focus of this research to argue against, because we're using evidence-based methods to shed light on things that no one can deny if the facts are as well laid out as I want them to be. But there's an old adage that comes to mind, which is careful what you wish for. So back in 2001, when we aspired to do this, we really had no basis to make that claim to be doing counterintelligence for anyone, let alone global civil society. It was a lot of hubris. We were thinking about, maybe this is something we'd aspire to do. Well, lo and behold, over many years, we've uncovered government espionage campaigns in real time, exposed them, disrupted them, including espionage operated by some of the world's most powerful actors, nation state espionage campaigns run by China, by Russia, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Iran, you name it. We've been there, and we've poked at the hornet's nest, so to speak. We've also, of course, documented meticulously the private companies that have enabled governments and have helped them undertake disinformation campaigns, cyber espionage campaigns. Especially a focus of the book is the mercenary spyware industry. And in fact, one prominent company, NSO Group, the Citizen Lab published the first reports on commercial spyware back in 2012, with reports on Fisher, then Hacking Team. We did the first report on NSO Group in 2016. So we've taken on some of these entities, and these are, of course, very powerful actors. These are um, uh, governments or companies that have a lot of resources at their disposal and have a track record of doing very duplicitous things. So insofar as we became successful at doing this, we became targets ourselves. And that's part of the story of the book, is how we met resistance doing this type of work, and how not everyone appreciated what we were doing, and tried to take efforts to subvert the Citizen Lab in various ways. Um, we've had many interesting consequences of the research, both good and bad. So the bad would include being targeted by private intelligence firms. I tell a story about my staff being approached by operatives from a company called Black Cube using false identities. Why were they doing that? To try to gather incriminating information about our researchers that might be used to discredit us. Um, that was a very scary episode to be at the center of that. When something like that happens, you really think twice about everything around you. You start looking over your shoulder a lot. And eventually, we actually were able to turn the tables and organize a sting with the help of Associated Press journalists in a Manhattan restaurant and expose that operation against us as well. But it really illustrated the gravitas of working in this area. When you are doing counterintelligence for civil society and you're good at it, these people that you're going up against are not just going to take it lying down. We've also had cases that have had major repercussions for governments around the world, national scandals precipitated by our research. I'm thinking in particular of Spain, for example, where we uncovered a massive domestic espionage campaign targeting a huge cross section of Catalan civil society, including the sitting president of Catalonia and the last three presidents of Catalonia, all had their phones hacked with mercenary spyware. Um, so the scandals that have emerged from the Citizen Labs work have been surreal at times. To see heads of intelligence agencies sacked in places like Greece or Spain because of our research has been quite something to behold. Um, I should say something just very quickly about this industry that is at the center of the book, which is the mercenary spyware industry. And one of the reasons that I wanted to write this book, and in fact, one of the reasons we do the work that we do, is I truly believe the mercenary spyware industry represents one of the single greatest risks to civil society right now. In a nutshell, you have companies that provide to government security services the ability to get inside any phone anywhere in the world at any time. And there literally is no defense for it as we speak. These are companies that can supply government actors with the ability to get inside a phone without any indication that any tampering has gone on. There's no visible interaction that something, visible indication, I should say, that something is wrong. No need to interact with a target. No need to click on a link. 1 minute your phone's fine, the next it's compromised and it's funneling data to a despot on the other side of the world. That's extremely powerful capabilities, but being put in the hands of some of the world's worst dictators and autocrats. And of course, we're so reliant on our devices now. They give a complete picture into your entire pattern of life. So to have this capability out there, unregulated, proliferating, as we've shown, is really scary. And the consequences of having a phone hacked are quite significant, not just for the person's data, but for their emotional and psychological well-being. I profile many victims in the book who've experienced this type of hacking, and the trauma that they evince is profound. When you realize that your phone has been under surveillance for the last 6 months and you had no idea, it can be emotionally debilitating. You start feeling guilty, perhaps, that you've exposed sensitive information or details about colleagues in your network or friends and family members. Perhaps they're intimate pictures on your device that are now appropriated by someone else and might be used in a blackmail campaign against you. This is the most insidious effect of the spyware that we've been documenting, is the psychological, emotional toll it takes on victims, with the end result being most of them retreat. They self-censor, and this may be the ultimate intent of some of these campaigns. There's a real gender dimension to it as well. Women who are the victims of this type of transnational repression experience these risks differently and are targeted differently as well. We've had many cases of uh, journalists who happen to be women who've had their minor children having their phones hacked as well to get at the principal target. So it's a insidious area. It's quite dark and frankly quite frightening as well. I would say that the book finishes right around the time Donald Trump was elected, and as Dennis talked about at the beginning, we live in new times now. This is truly unprecedented what's happening in the United States, this rapid descent into authoritarianism. And so I ended the book kind of forecasting where things might go, not only for the world at large, but for groups like mine. Obviously, doing this type of work is extremely risky. It's very antagonistic. Powerful actors are not going to sit back, and having the United States take the measures it's taking against academic institutions really makes me concerned about the future of the type of work that we do. Of course, the Citizen Lab is part of a community. We collaborate with many organizations out there, Access Now, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, many others. And unfortunately, those groups are experiencing pretty significant challenges now. Some of them because they may have received US government funding directly, either themselves directly or their partners. And we're seeing the rug being pulled out from global civil society. A lot of the groups that receive funding, for example, from the National Endowment for Democracy or the US government State Department, for example, are organizations that provide digital security support for NGOs around the world. So the end result is there's going to be a concerted pressure on groups like ours, and also perhaps less ability, less capacity to defend against the most serious threats out there in the world. So there is a bit of an ominous note at the end of the book, but I would say there's also a hopeful note. So I reflect on the fact that after 20 years of doing this type of work, I really appreciate, first of all, the very talented people that I've been able to recruit to work at the Citizen Lab. Some have been with me for over a decade or more. And also the community that I just mentioned that we're a part of also gives me hope. So no matter what happens to one organization or to me in particular, the movement is bigger than any one person or one organization. And I think we've built a model of how to do a type of rigorous digital accountability research, hold bad actors accountable, and perhaps inspire other people to do the same thing. So the reason I wrote this book, I would say there are two reasons. One is the typical writing that I do with the Citizen Lab is very clinical for a good reason. We have to be very precise. These are scientific reports. There's a lot that rests on getting every single word right. This book, Chasing Shadows, was a chance for me to write in a kind of unplugged way. I had a lot of fun writing this book, just telling stories and trying to be as engaging as possible. And that's because, honestly, there have been so many adventures over the last 15 years or so doing this that I felt like it was time to write them down and get them on paper for posterity before it's too late. We're all getting older and time's moving on. So I wanted to make sure that I set the record straight, at least from my perspective of what's gone on with the Citizen Lab over the last 20 years or so. So I'll end it there and look forward to chatting with all of you. Thank you, Dennis.